Marianne Williamson is joining us today, best-selling author, activist, former Democratic presidential candidate, host of the new Marianne Williamson podcast, and a Newsweek columnist, among other things. Marianne, thanks for joining us today. I really appreciate you being here.
Oh, Julianna, I appreciate you inviting me. Thank you.
I'd like to start with getting your comments on the recent events at the Capitol. You have written several books about how we can return love to our politics. Can we still get there as a nation in light of what happened at the Capitol and is happening across the country starting last week, or are we farther than ever?
Both. Yes, we can get there, and also farther than ever. I mean, we had a civil war in this country, so it's not like this is the first time we've had terrible crisis and terrible division. We can get there, but we have to have a very sober and mature perspective on that. It's not going to be easy and it's not going to be quick. It's going to be a process. And if we truly are interested in the level of fundamental course correction that it will take in order to seriously set a new trajectory, a trajectory for the United States more in line with the principles on which we purport to stand, I think we should be telling ourselves and thinking of this in terms of a 20-year process. But we can do a lot in the first 10.
See, it sounds like President Biden is going to have to do a lot in the first 100 if he's going to show us that he's on the right track and not still a centrist.
I think for those of us on the left, the assumption still holds that the main purpose of the Biden presidency is that he stopped the trajectory of neo-fascism that was represented by President Trump. I'm hopeful, of course, that he will be taking giant strides forward, but I'm concerned, as many progressives are, that his plans are for baby steps. I think incrementalism and that moderation represents reminds me of Martin Luther King's line. He called it the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. I don't think we have time for that. When you're talking about a serious crisis of the kind that we're experiencing now, I don't think the Democrats can afford to see themselves as having 2 years to get this right. I think he needs to show in demonstrable ways to the American people within the first 100 days that he is coming in with a real FDR-like boldness and willing and ready to provide a massive infusion of hope and opportunity economically into the life of the average American. I think that anything less than that displays an institutional neglect of the needs of Americans, that institutional neglect having become now entrenched in the way our government does business.
Oh, it's so, it's hard to, we want to have the hope for Joe Biden. We want to hope that he doesn't squander having all of the legislative power in the Democrats' hands. It's not just Joe Biden, obviously, it's all of the Democrats. Now that we have the House and the Senate, we don't want Obama 2.0. Do you have any indication that Joe Biden would be different than Obama now that he wields all this power?
I have no indication whatsoever, but it does occur to me, I could be completely wrong. But if he were standing in front of me and he were really open to hearing me, I'd say, what the hell, Joe, you're 78. Why don't you just
I was thinking the same thing. What else is there?
Really, that's exactly how I see it, but I don't know.
I mean, he already has the money, right, that he needs for his family. He already has.
And you have the Senate.
Yeah.
Why don't you go for it?
Go for it.
Why don't you go for it? But neither you nor I
Trump certainly went for it in the opposite direction. He didn't hold back.
Well, there's a lot of institutional resistance to going bold. The corporatist Democratic establishment doesn't do bold, except, to be honest, for their own power.
Marianne, what do you make of a spiritual leader like Raphael Warnock being drawn to public service and then elected?
I think it's wonderful. And I look forward to the day when a woman is given as much respect for a spiritual and religious background in politics as a man such as he is.
Thank you very much. I remember talking about that with you on our former radio program. Yeah, exactly. Well said.
Reverend Warnock has been the minister at Ebenezer Baptist Church. That was Martin Luther King's church. I spoke there, actually. I was invited by Coretta Scott King to speak there on the MLK Day celebration right after 9/11. It's a very profound landmark in American political history as well as American religious history.
I have to say, the smearing of you as a spiritual, whatever they called you when you were running for office, I think really does a disservice to all Democrats who actually have a spiritual life. It gives the right wing the complete, a closer moral authority because they believe they have Jesus, and they believe, they believe Jesus is on their side, and it's a war and all of this business. And it undermines the fact that a lot, I don't have the numbers, but a lot of Democrats also have a deep and abiding spirituality or religion to their lives.
Well, it's when it comes to policy, I think that on the left, we do have more compassionate focus, whether it has to do with caring for the poor, caring for the sick, caring for the hungry, caring for peace. But there is a lack of willingness to claim that mantle as spiritually based.
Why?
I don't know, because I grew up at a time when it wasn't true. Martin Luther King was certainly open. He was a preacher. He said we have to have quantitative shift in our circumstances as well as a qualitative shift in our souls. He said it was time to inject a new dimension of love into the sinews of human civilization. He said that the desegregation of the American South was the political externalization of the goal of the civil rights movement, but that the ultimate goal was the establishment of the beloved community. Can you imagine if I said that? So,
I mean, you said something about children and everyone lost their minds. That we should be good to children. I remember that.
Yeah, how dare I? What a radical fringe idea. Obviously, she's a wacko, dangerous, crazy woman.
Yes, exactly. I have so many directions I'd like to go here. Georgia being the very seat of slavery, electing a black senator, a Jewish senator by, black people. Stacey Abrams worked down there getting out the black vote and the people of color coming out to vote because of her work. Is there, I guess poetic justice is a nice way of putting it, but your thoughts about the full circle nature of the fact that Georgia is really and black people in Georgia, which is again one of the seats of slavery in this country, have stopped Trump.
I think it's fantastic. And I think it's so important that we take a moment to celebrate something not only so profoundly good, but so profoundly American. We should take down every statue of a Confederate leader in Atlanta and put up a statue of Stacey Abrams. Yeah. I mean, it is so profound and so fantastic. In terms of the fact that they delivered us the first black senator, I don't think I think it's the second black senator from the South.
From Georgia itself, I think it's the first black senator.
And a Jewish senator as well. It's what America should be. They both represented a vision of America that is aligned with the ideals on which we purport to stand. And in America, it's the ideal that we are a religiously pluralistic nation. That's the idea out of many one. And every once in a while, we show it. I think it's so important that we remember that. Julianna, so many times people on the right only want to talk about the things America has done right, but have no listening and abide by no conversation about our shadows, what we've done wrong and what we need to correct. But sometimes people on the left only want to talk about what we've done wrong and will not give, I believe, appropriate credence and acknowledgement to how many things we have done right, particularly the fact that many of the things we've done right have been correcting what we had done wrong. Yes, we had slavery. We also had abolition. Yes, we had the institutionalized suppression of women. We also had the women's suffragette movement. Yes, we had segregation. We also had the civil rights desegregation and the civil rights movement. So I believe right now this is an example of something we did right. Yes, we had Trump. We also have the fact that the people of the United States, and I think this is important, Julianna, the Republicans would not get rid of this narcissistic, malignant cancer. well, that's an oxymoron, this awful thing that he represents, the Democrats couldn't. The people of the United States did. The American people voted him out. The American people said to the Democrats, here's the House and here's the Senate. But let's not forget what happened here. The American people stepped in. And that's why when you ask about Joe Biden, the kind of political revolution that we need in this country has to come from within the system and outside the system. And it was forces outside the system that finally stopped this madness, not forces inside. They can't do it without us any more than we can do it without them.
It's my great hope that people who sort of were half asleep during and just voting for Hillary and kind of less aware than they are now, that Trump's egregious behaviors and his transgressions against humanity have woken those people up, and that they're not going to go back to sleep. They are aware of what's going on, and there will be more pressure on Joe Biden than there was on Barack Obama coming off of George W. Bush's presidency. Your thoughts about that?
Well, I think that on the left, I hope enough of us are aware that we made a big mistake trusting that Obama would be as president who he campaigned as. I mean, that's really what happened there. He campaigned as one person, a much more progressive person than he turned out to be as president. I think that we've lost some innocence on that. And I think we're far more wary. Plus, Biden didn't even campaign as this great progressive.
I mean, he was going to lose. It was like everybody got together and said, we'll take this guy because he can get the middle, and the left is going to just follow because the left is actually aware of what's going on.
No, wait, stop. Did you just say everybody got together and said, we'll take this guy?
Well, I mean, like 5 guys in the Democratic Party got together. That's everybody I was talking to.
Together.
Correct me, please.
We all know who it was, made a phone call. And there was another person who said, get her off the stage. I mean, come on. It's no different than a small group of men smoking cigars 100 years ago in the back room. It is a pre-prescribed conversation that they allow to have happen. It is a pre-prescribed set of people that they allow to be the nominee. And after what they did to Bernie twice and everything else that we saw happen, let's not even utter the words, everybody got together.
Yes, thank you. I agree. I appreciate your correction, because that would have been 5,000 comments at the bottom of this video. So thank you very much. You were right. That is not, everybody got together and wanted Bernie, pretty much, if you want to say.
Well, we don't know, but we were certainly on that track. We didn't get a chance to know because we didn't have Super Tuesday because of that phone call that went out. So,
yeah.
And
let's talk about other ways that the Democratic Party is complicit in the rise of Trump. And I do want to thank you for saying that, you know, you're in the media sphere. I'm in the media sphere. I feel like some liberals have profited in the media by just bashing the Democrats with this I'm liberaler than you are kind of thing. And I feel like that plays right into the hands of Republicans, but it certainly hands people a very large audience. So I appreciate how you said we have actually done some things right as a country, as a people, even as a Democratic Party. Perhaps even the Republicans may have done something right. I'm not going to go there, but I do think the Democratic Party was complicit in the rise of Trump. Do you have thoughts about this?
Yeah. The problem started 40 years ago with the election of Ronald Reagan and Reaganomics. That is when we began, through trickle-down economics, the massive transfer of wealth into the hands of 1%. Bill Clinton didn't stop that. Barack Obama didn't stop that. Income inequality grew under both of those presidents. Under Bill Clinton, we had the Telecommunications Act of 1996 that allowed for the monopolization of the media. There are so many things that have happened under Democratic presidents as well as Republican presidents that basically set us on the path towards a Donald Trump. The fact that the Democrats are better than the Republicans, while true, does not mean that it's good enough. And Democrats must be willing to look in the mirror. It's no different than an individual, no different than any organization or system, when sometimes you have to say, yeah, you did this right, but you also did this wrong. And this needs to be addressed. So the massive transfer of wealth through unfair taxes, through corporate subsidies, through the surrender to big pharma, through the surrender to all manner of multinational corporate interests, including defense contractors. This has slowed down under Democrats. It has not stopped under Democrats. So the way I look at it is that the Republican Party has been completely taken over, hook, line, and sinker, by this corporatist mentality. Let's just surrender everything into the hands of this corporate aristocracy of corporate America. The Democrats wring their hands. Oh, it's so terrible, all the pain. And we're going to treat and ameliorate as much of that pain on the periphery as we possibly can. And we're going to really fight so that it doesn't hurt so much. But the Democrats themselves will not challenge the underlying corporate forces that make all that suffering inevitable, because they too take the money. And until we deal with that, until we deal with money in politics, the corruption of the entire system will continue. We talk about it as a duopoly, but I don't think duopoly is the word. It's a monopoly. The problem on our hands is not just where Republicans and Democrats are different, but where they're too much the same. And we must address that before there will be any serious fundamental course correction.
Marianne, I know that the Democratic Party treated you terribly. How are you doing with that? I mean, it's like you have to see them everywhere. They're all over the place.
Well, I grew up at a time when the Democratic Party was different. So I have an institutional memory of when it wasn't this way. I am old enough to remember how this slide happened. When the Supreme Court said money is free speech, when Bill Clinton established the Democratic Leadership Council, what Citizens United ultimately did. But there is what Matt Taibbi calls, what does he call it, the Gang of 500? I see it as a political media industrial complex. I naively didn't realize before I ran for president how vicious they are. But as much as I saw and experienced viscerally on a very personal level, the viciousness with which they will nullify your voice if they find you inconvenient, the politics of personal destruction, the smears, the whole thing, the caricature, I saw it. But I saw something else, Juliana, and that is how wonderful the voters are. I saw it was almost like a parallel universe. I come out of that experience with greater faith rather than less faith in the power of democracy if you will simply get out of the way and let it work. The people of Iowa could have handled this. And this is true back to 2016 with Bernie. The American people could have handled this, just like the people in Kentucky could have handled Mitch McConnell if Chuck Schumer had not pushed Amy McGrath down their throats.
Yeah.
So, I believe, and I saw something so moving, Juliana. The people in Iowa take their role very seriously. The people in New Hampshire take their role very seriously. The people in Nevada and South Carolina, they are educated. They're up to the job. What you need is to get the system out of the way and let the people decide. And that's the most important thing we need to do now, is to repair our democracy itself. And the problem is not just with voter suppression and gerrymandering and all those things, which we know and which HR 1 would handle. We also have to deal with the institutional elitism and patronizing, paternalistic way that the elite establishment Democrats think that they know better.
Yeah, I remember being one of the first people out in news circles saying, "Hey, what about Bernie?" Because that was only allowed on the fringe, and I remember being laughed off of HuffPost Live, laughed off of other sets, like, "Oh, that's ridiculous."
I felt the same way, and I also want to point out something. In Europe, in any advanced democracy in Europe, Bernie's policies would be seen as middle of the road. They would not be seen as the far left. So the very fact that there was a projection that he's fringe is the problem.
Yes. Marianne, people experienced last week's attack on the Capitol in a very deep way. People felt personally injured watching what was happening, even from a distance. Can you talk directly to people who are experiencing that hurt, and whatever you'd like to say that you think might be useful there?
America is experiencing a great reckoning. We're not experiencing anything we haven't done to other people. How many other countries' capitals have been raided in large part, or at least indirectly, by American foreign policy? The joke going around South America last week was the reason the raid didn't succeed was because there was no American embassy to provide logistical support.
Wow. Amazing.
I mean, this is the time for radical truth-telling, Julianna. I come from a career where if you're going to heal your life, if your life's really in trouble, you got to put it all on the table. And the projection onto that kind of work is too lightweight.
No,
traditional
heaviest work you can do.
We got to get real. And America, I think what's happening is that many people, certainly on the left, realize this has been a 40-year process getting here. Admittedly, nobody expected, once it did fall apart, that it would fall apart this quickly. Nobody expected that. Nobody expected that one man could do this much damage. But anybody with an eye for what's really going on beneath the surface of things knew there's trouble ahead. And that's what I've written books about. There's trouble ahead.
Marianne, I'm very excited about your podcast that recently launched, the Marianne Williamson podcast. It's going to be great to have more Marianne Williamson in the political sphere. I really appreciate you coming on the program today.
Thank you. I'm glad to have been here, and thank you. I just want to say one thing, if I may, Julianna, because this conversation about how we feel now. We feel terrible, and we should feel terrible. It's really bad. But at the same time, cynicism is just an excuse for not helping. So when I say that I understand why this is happening, that this was inevitable on a certain level, given how much malfeasance there has been, not just from one man, but from an entire system. And I believe that we must be very mature and sober in our appraisal of what is going on. I am convinced at the deepest level of myself that what other generations have done, whether it was abolitionists or women suffragettes or a civil rights movement, we can do what they did. We can rise to the occasion the way they did. And it's also important to remember that this is simply the latest iteration of a process, monopolistic capitalist forces. That's what this is about. When you have forces, whether it has to do with suppression of women, whether it has to do with slavery, whether it has to do with segregation, whether it has to do with today's corporatism, it's the same template. Other generations rose up, and I believe that we are rising up, and we will rise up. And I think it's important that we remind each other of that. I wouldn't want to leave our conversation with the sense that I think it's hopeless and it's all over, because I don't in any way think it's all over. I think we're in the middle of it, and I believe with all my heart that we're going to make it to the proverbial promised land. I know we will if we let the American people do their thing and democracy reign.
Thank you so much, Marianne. And thank you so much for the part that you have been playing in getting us there. I really appreciate that on both a personal level and a professional level, and just as an American. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Right back at you. Thank you so much, Julianna. Bye.
Don't forget to find the Marianne Williamson podcast everywhere great podcasts are found. It's fantastic. You've got all the people that anyone would want to sit down and have a conversation with, and you are the conversant. I mean, what could be better? So
you're so kind. Thank you.
Follow Marianne on Twitter, Mar Williamson. Follow us on act.tv across platforms. I'm Julianna Forlano. Find me on Twitter. Thanks everyone for watching. And the algorithm loves your comments, but so do I. So if you want to support this show, please write a comment, and I always write back to everyone. Thanks. Have a great day.